Why are used Land Rovers so cheap? Could it be this finely crafted British engineering? Or could it be that the King and Queen of England absolutely love these? Even the fact that they can hammer the sand dunes of the Mojave Desert, or plow through the frozen northern Arctic of Canada, as well as slosh through the swamps of southern Everglades in Florida, and even outrun the lions during your African safari. So with such a wide variety of talent, it makes a person wonder, why in fact is a used Land Rover so cheap? Let's get into it now. Let's take this from the top and give you some examples of how in fact cheap these vehicles are in the used car market. First of all, I want to start here with, we have a Land Rover as we're talking about, and it's a Discovery, but specifically we're talking about a Sport HSE luxury. Now, yes, they have a great look and design. I love their taillights, very glossy, lots of gloss finishing here. Of course, nice highlighted overhangs right here. This is a Land Rover, lots of badging, and it's a great looking vehicle. I mean, just look along here. I love the sight lines. They have these great details along there, and even the headlights are quite nice. This here is, again, is the Discovery Land Rover product, as you see right there. They do have all the nice details. It's a good looking unit with all of the great touches, wheels that are high gloss. You have lots of sunroof top on there, and people are just loving these. It's brand new. These started about $60,000 to $65,000 Canadian funds. That's right, and went up from there. But the reality, I checked autotrader.com and I checked all kinds of classifieds, and I found tons of examples of a 3-year-old version, basically once the warranty's gone, of these vehicles only worth $30,000 on the used car market. Remember, a vehicle that people paid $60,000, $70,000 or $80,000 for, put PPF on it, second set of wheels, put all the extras. They end up sometimes out the door price with a lot of these vehicles, spending $70,000 or $80,000 and then only getting $30K back after 3 years. Absolutely punishing. But it represents a huge deal for those maybe that are interested in buying one of these on the used car market. Another product is a spin-off of course, Land Rover, and we're talking about a Range Rover again. As we see right here, this here is a Range Rover, but it specifically is a Velar. And the Velar is obviously a very sleek vehicle. You do get these flush mounted handles that pop out, and they freeze up in the winter, by the way. Beautiful lights on the back, the light bar. Land Rover, as I already mentioned, we're talking about a Velar P380 HSE, and they're beautiful vehicles. I mean, you get all the glass roof on top, you get lots of space in the cabin, and it looks slick, but that's where it ends. These also too shed about 50% of their value in 3 years. Lots of issues, transmissions locking up, you can't get it into gear, you often have to have it towed in, electronic problems, infotainment issues, of course these handles freezing up, doors and windows freezing up. Look, even the O-ring or the gasket here is all bunched up. So they have their quality issues. And while they're absolutely beautiful to own within a warranty period, a lot of people realize, 3 years in, I better get rid of it. That's why they take such a hit on the used car market, and why you can get such a great deal if you look past those. And if you, a little bit of a glutton for punishment, a Range Rover Velar, or even vehicles like this, Range Rover, again, Land Rover product. We have a Range Rover Sport as an autobiography. These were absolutely huge, immense money when they were brand new, as well as a full-size Range Rover, all examples of vehicles that come with a host of technical issues, rear electric brake systems locking up, carbon fouling, direct injectors failing, as well as the fuel pumps, cooling system woes, rear tailgate issues locking up. And while most of the transmissions are in pretty stout shape with a lot of Range Rovers, because a lot of them carry the ZF 8-speed auto, it is a bulletproof unit. The fact remains is cooling leaks, carbon fueling leaks, timing chains on certain generations of the Range Rovers are all examples of why people often decide they want to get rid of these vehicles once warranty runs out. And those are some critical reasons why people get rid of a lot of these Land Rovers within 3 years, and once the warranty's gone, they don't want to risk the financial ruin. So what kind of brutal depreciation do we see on the full-size Land Rover Discovery? Well, here's a full-size Land Rover Discovery. We just talked about the Sport model. Discovery, as we see, here's the Sport. You can see definitively it's quite a bit smaller, more shrunken down. Of course, first of all, you have a much bigger back round end. This very prominent sticks out. It definitely stands out. Beautiful HSE SI6 right here by Land Rover, as you can see, beautiful. And this is a Discovery. Of course, you do have this interesting wiper that hangs up underneath here, whereas over here, we have the wiper that sits on the glass. So this is definitely much more stealth mode, a very intriguing piece right here. And of course, we look down the side, it's very upright. You do get oversized wheels on here, more badging by Land Rover. I love the single touch accent in, and obviously very easy to get in. Foldaways with LEDs, and we get the Discovery badging right there. Beautiful headlights, feels a little more like a Range Rover from the front end. And there you have it, a beautiful vehicle from the front. And you get the brushed aluminum in this trim here, which is nice. Heads up display on there, as you can see, and they're very nice vehicles. But as I said, the Sport over there starts at 60K Canadian, and usually out the door is more like 70 or 80, whereas this one here starts at 80,000 Canadian dollars and goes all the way up to probably 90, almost $100,000 out the door with taxes, extras. By the time you spec it up the way you want it, you're going to spend $90,000 to $100,000 brand new for this vehicle. But do you know what they're going for? I checked the traders for those as well, and we're finding the Discovery here, Land Rover product right there, goes for about $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 for nice low mileage versions of this vehicle, which tells me it loses about 50%, 50, that's right, 50% of its value is gone in 3 years. That's devastating. That is literal devastation. We all talk about trying to save our money, try to save for retirement, and then we go and spend something like this and lose half of our money. We can lose $40,000 or $50,000 in 3 years. You blink, sleep, 365 days times 3 years, boom, and it's gone. That's a huge expensive vehicle to own, and that's why they can again represent phenomenal deal if it's well looked after, maybe has an extended warranty, the first owner was careful with the ownership of that vehicle, could represent a great deal. And let's talk about pricing on some of the other vehicles. Now, this is one of my personal favorite Land Rovers. I like the looks of them. They feel very utilitarian and they feel more honest. They look more like a conventional Land Rover should look, or Range Rover. And to me, this feels more like an off-road machine. We're clearly looking at a Defender, and for about $72,000 Canadian is where they start. You get a little 4-cylinder engine. You can ramp that up to all the way up to $140,000. But specifically in a model like this, you know, the Defender Land Rover product, you get this nice little checker plate on there, nice little grille. Of course, they have big off-road beefy tires and a fold-away mirror. Love these handles, pretty simplistic too. Piano gloss finishing, but specifically we're looking at the Defender P400 right there. And this model here actually is a little bit cheaper than the full 140. Yes, you can get this vehicle for about $100,000 Canadian, and out the door price, by the time you put on some of the extras, you're gonna spend anywhere $110,000, $120,000 for this vehicle. That is not cheap, because when I scoured the trader, I found lots of these vehicles going for $60,000, $65,000. And so while in 3 years, it's not necessarily losing half, but it's certainly losing somewhere in that 35 to 40% of its value in that first 3 years, and probably has something to do with the fact that it looks more rugged, looks more robust, and it's a fresher design than some of the other ho-hum, all-terrain looking minivans. This vehicle definitely looks more the part, and that's why it probably holds a little better value, but it still depreciates like it's going out of style. Could represent some amazing deals. I mean, look, you do get this bag that hangs off the side here. I love that lockable bag that hangs. And of course here, you can just mount that on the side. You do get glass on the roof, and it's just a good looking vehicle all the way around. So like I said, you can definitely get some phenomenal deals if you're looking for them, but why are they so cheap? The first reason why these vehicles are so cheap on the used market simply is the fact that it's the reputation. Everybody assumes it's British engineered. It's gonna have problems. You know, Tata Motors now owns the JLR group, so it's not necessarily all derived and built in Britain. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, you could call that good or you can call that not so good. There's a lot of perception. A lot of people have this perception that the quality's not there, the reliability's not there, and sadly there is some facts to some of that. I mean, we talk about some of the more complex versions like the Range Rovers, timing chain issues, air ride suspension problems on the full-size systems. Of course, we have coolant leaks with the infamous Y-pipe on some of the engines on the V6 and V8 engines that were supercharged. Some of the smaller turbo 4s like the Ingenium 4-cylinder engine isn't necessarily a workhorse. It's not the speed demon, and it's certainly not the most refined, but it's simplistic, it's accessible, the turbo's available, you can get all the parts and around it. It has lots of space in the engine compartment. It's actually fairly simple for a DIYer, and it's actually not that terribly unreliable, especially when you look at some of its competitors from Mercedes and Audi. It's no better, no worse. As well as some of the V8s, quite a good engine, strong and stout, but there's some maintenance items. The supercharger snorkel, direct injection, O2 sensors are a common issue, but the transmissions are solid. It's not all soggy, wet shorts when you're buying a Land Rover. No, there are some wins and you can get a great vehicle, but there are definitely some pitfalls. So you have to do your homework, and some of the perception is real, but some of it's not. And the second reason why they're so cheap on the used car market comes down to a lot of other factors, but one specific one that comes to mind is competition. Now, while this isn't a luxury brand we're looking at right here, we are looking at a Ford Bronco Sport. It's definitely a small, affordable SUV that's been carrying a lot of popularity. Of course, Mercedes-Benz like this, we have a GLE right here. Beautiful. It's hard to compete when you've got a brand like this that's been around a long time, and there is sort of this perception that Mercedes-Benz creates a very quality, rugged product that's built to last. And of course, these vehicles are beautiful. You also get great detail like that, and big tall rims, lots of chrome on there, lots of great detail, sunroof on top, and we're talking AMG versions, GLE 63S. So you get a lot of great vehicles like this that you're fighting with for competition and market share. But then you even have big guys like this. We have the Cadillac Escalade. Of course, we have the full-size Bronco. A lot of people wanted to get a hand on these, and they're not cheap. So they almost fall into the luxury car territory. And yes, they have these great little handles like this, big beefy flares, unique little wheels like this, of course, with the horsey symbol. This is a big bend, very rugged, very much like a Jeep, but it costs luxury car money. We have a fabric top on this particular unit with plastic, oversized spare wheel, which does represent a vehicle that really fights for the same space as the Defender. It very much feels like a Defender. In a lot of ways, it looks like a Defender. So you have vehicles like this that are also taking market share. Of course, Jeep Grand Cherokees are now appealing to a more specific upscale market. Jaguar also produces an F-Pace, which direct competitor to one of its brothers. Of course, the JLR group is all part of the same family. We also talk about BMWs, Audis create products in the SUV lineups that directly compete with a lot of these vehicles in the Land Rover group. Vehicles like this as well are direct competitor for the Land Rover products. We have obviously full-size SUVs. This one's a Modena right here, and clearly it's the pitchfork of despair, and we're talking about Maserati. So the bottom line is it has a lot of hefty competition, and that's the key. Too much competition. And when you're out there shopping for your next slightly used SUV, maybe in the luxury car segment, maybe something that is a little more off-road capable, there's a lot of great options out there. If you like the just pure raw, you've got Broncos and you've got Wranglers. If you want something more luxurious, you've got pretty much something from every manufacturer provides competition directly to Land Rover and Range Rover. And because it's more of a niche market, a lot of people either A, haven't heard of it, or B, realize that they don't have the service network nearby, so they don't even bother and go with something a little more mainstream, because most of the German rivals are usually better supported. There's usually a lot more dealership networks for vehicles like Mercedes, BMW, and Audi than there are for vehicles like Land Rover, Range Rover, which you might find one of these in a city of over 1 million, whereas Mercedes, BMW, Audi, you'll find those typically 2 or 3 per million population type of city. So therefore you've got options, and that's what people want, options. So a lot of times it's the stiff competition that drives people away from even looking and considering a Land Rover product. So another main reason why they're so cheap on the used market is beautiful vehicles like the Range Rover here. Even the JLR group Jaguar is part of that. The Defenders, we have more Range Rovers, more Defenders. We have Velars over here. We have Evokes. We have everything this side under the sun. And if you look on their sites, they have tons of incentives. As a matter of fact, loyalty incentives knock 1.5% off of the interest rate. You get finance rates as low as 2.5%, 3.5%. You get lease rates as low as 4.5%. And so it's very competitive. It makes you want to go back and buy a brand new, shiny, updated version. And that's what's starting to happen. There's way too much incentives to ignore. And if you like the vehicle, and most people do, at least in the warranty period, you often find yourself, well, you know, if only I had a little more warranty, if only I had lower mileage. Well, this is a great way to do it. And it's this incentives on selling you a brand new vehicle that gets you into a position where you don't want to buy a used one. And people that are in the market for these decide, you know, maybe I don't necessarily need to buy a used one. Maybe I can get such a great deal, great incentives rates. I'll just buy a brand new one with these rates. And so if you want to get yourself a beautiful Discovery like this, but you don't want to worry about all the warranty challenges and the reliability concerns, or the reputation that they're not that reliable, or even you want to get into a full-size Range Rover like this, you can definitely do that. Or a Defender. You can get your brand new vehicle, plastic on the seats, and you can get a competitive interest rate, especially at a time when interest rates are very high. What's going on here is the JLR group is often offering very aggressive finance lease rates just to get you in the door. So because you see that, and then if you're looking at a late model used one, you start to do the numbers and realize, well, maybe it's either 3.5% here, or if I buy a used one, it might be 12.5% because I don't necessarily have the greatest record and credit score. So it ends up, you crunch the numbers, you start to realize, wait a minute, it's not much difference between, you know, in a 5 or 6 or 7 year time frame to get a brand new one over a slightly used one. But now I got warranty and no troubles. That's why you've got strong, aggressive interest rates and you've got big incentives to get you into a brand new one. And that's why a lot of people just ignore the idea of buying used. The next reason why a lot of used Land Rovers are so cheap comes down to the sheer fact that most people who are buying used vehicles are a little more frugal. That's why they're buying a used vehicle in the first place. And it comes down to maintenance costs. When you look at those beautiful Defenders right there by Land Rover and every other Land Rover product, there's no doubt they're beautiful. You have to drive that vehicle into that shop right there. You're going to pay the price. It comes at a significant price, that is too. I personally own a JLR product. I have a Jaguar F-Type with the V8 and it costs a lot of money. As you all probably well aware, JLR, Jaguar, Land Rover group are all very much the same. A lot of the parts are interchangeable. The business model is very much the same. And as you expect, costs are very much the same. And Land Rover products, no different than anything else that I've experienced in Jaguar. Now, I have to tell you personally, when I drive my Jaguar into the shop, as most people who own Land Rovers and Range Rovers will likely find that their costs come out of there with an oil service that's $400 or $500, $600. Even just a basic set of maintenance tasks like the one I just experienced. Well, I just took my F-Type in recently, and this is very much applicable to when you're driving a vehicle like a Range Rover Sport or many other the upper scale Land Rovers. You're going to get expensive maintenance. I did an oil filter, air filter, cabin air, brake fluid flush, transmission flush, pull the wheels off, check the brakes, do a little road test, and Bob's your uncle. Yes, it's a fair amount of work, but they were able to wrap it up within about, 5 or 6 hours. And with all of that said, do you have any idea what that ended up costing me? $2,500. Yes, that's right, $2,500. That's a lot of money to have my car looked after. And there was nothing broken. That was merely just the cost of doing a little bit of added maintenance. Yes, and that's where a lot of people get scared, maintenance costs. You're gonna find people having to spend a large dollar just to keep the vehicle tip-top, filters, fluids, as you should, but that comes at a significant dollars. So at the end of the day, maintenance costs are those things that scare frugal people away, the very people that were looking for a used car in the first place. And let me give you an example of maintenance, not just oil services. What could possibly cost oil to cost that much? But it's more than just that. It's all of the other things. Things, for example, like brakes and tires are typical items that you wear, and that's maintenance. And if you don't do that maintenance, you're gonna feel the hurt. Now, looking at these two vehicles, the Land Rover, for example, you're gonna have tires like this that are very large, heavy duty, they're built for more off-roading. Often they're larger in diameter, and that's gonna cost you a lot more money. Could cost 2 or 3 times as much money as the smaller road tire that you're finding the Honda on. This is usually a smaller Sipes. This is usually made more for highway and quieter road, whereas this is more off-roading, beefier, heavier duty tire. It's gonna cost you 4 times the amount of money as these tires. Also the brakes, look at the brakes, very large. Often you're dealing with 13, 14, 15-inch calipers under there, and a lot of these vehicles even come with carbon ceramic. You might also have 2 and 4 piston calipers, whereas the Hondas just have a single piston caliper right there and a much smaller disc there to change. And so it's not just about the oil services and fluids. When you're looking at the daily consumables, the tires and brakes as an example, Hondas, Toyotas, Mazdas are all going to be very, very low cost to maintain, whereas a Land Rover product is going to be high cost, bigger tires, bigger brakes, expensive components that are borrowed from Jaguars and Range Rovers, and those vehicles don't come cheap. Everything's higher tech, bigger, more powerful, and beefier. And while you're up to the task of doing more off-roading than a simple little vehicle like a Honda CR-V is, the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you really need? Do you want the off-road, or do you want the day-to-day commute? Maybe you want a little bit of both. I don't know, that's your decision. But at the end of the day, a big part of the maintenance costs are what drives people away from Land Rover. So you go and you have a look at what we're talking about, the Land Rover garbage bins. And I hate to say I'm sniffing around in the garbage, but when you see engines like this sitting around, it often makes you wonder what happened here. Could have been a bad timing chain. Maybe you had bad worn cam lobes. Maybe the coolant line failed and overheated the engine, resulting in a warped heads. Or maybe something internally broke and there's no compression. Or you have another look further into the bin. You see lots of parts like brake parts, which are very expensive, suspension wearing out prematurely. You see fuel lines. You see more suspension parts and drive shaft issues. Of course, more fuel lines over there. Exhaust leaks. And a whole plethora of other components in there that represents very expensive suspension, engine, and fuel system problems. And see, that's the problem, why they're so cheap on the used market. People just know that they break. they tend to be a little fragile, and a lot of components fail on them way earlier than they should, or sustain failures that you wouldn't see on a typical Honda or Toyota, which is really obscure. But vehicles like this, we're looking at a Range Rover, and again, it's a Land Rover product, but you look down here, and this is pretty typical. Look, the air suspension right here is flattened right out. The rear brakes or the e-brake system sometimes are a problem, and these supercharged engines that you find in these Range Rovers are often susceptible to snorkel rattle. You get a rattling noise where the vehicle, you turn it off and clink, you hear this clinking noise, or it just clinks randomly at idle because there's a spring in there and it starts to wear out, or direct injection systems under the hood that are very problematic. And what they mean is you usually wind up having to change those high pressure, high dollar fuel injectors, the fuel pump, because it's direct injected, also big dollars. And of course, there's the infamous Y pipe on the supercharged V8 on here that can end up costing you a whole engine like we just saw in that crate because they blow a gasket. There's a seam on that plastic Y pipe that tends to split. And if you don't catch it early enough, you can literally overheat your engine. And all aluminum engine overheated, you might as well throw it out. Sure, you can machine it, but it's a huge expense. Infotainment system problems in here. Of course, sunroof issues coming off the rails, and sometimes water leaking in there by the windows or by the sunroof. Carbon fouling coming out of the exhaust tips. And unfortunately, it's a sheer reliability of great looking vehicles like the Defender by Land Rover right there, or Range Rover products, Discoveries as we see right here, or the whole list of LR4s and the whole 9 yards, are all in here because they're getting service. It could be maintenance, it could be a catastrophic failure. You don't know. That's the problem. I don't know, they don't know. But the reality is when you'd walk through a Toyota or Lexus dealership, usually the cars are in there for something small, needs a brake job, maybe a starter went, something like that. When these go, it's usually something big, $4,000-$5,000 system because your suspension let go, your air ride let go, you're at $3,500 to fix that. Direct injected fuel injectors, of course, that's going to be a full set of V8s. It's going to cost you a huge amount of money. You're talking thousands there. So that's the problem. Everything is so expensive and it's not necessarily the most reliable. And it's the very reliability that chokes it out for a lot of people. That's why, in fact, many people don't even want to touch a Land Rover product to save their life. And in fact, that drives the prices down. And with all of that said, be sure to check out right there. Maybe you want something Italian. How about a used Maserati? Hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.